is 16 GMT, 7:30 p.m. in Tehran, 12 midday in Washington. This is Al Jazeera live from Doha with our continuing coverage of the war between the US, Israel and Iran. I'm Adrian Finnegan. The latest this hour, Iran rejects US conditions for a ceasefire, calling them excessive and unreasonable, and outlines its own terms to end the conflict. The US and Israel have carried out more strikes on Iran. At least 12 people are killed in southern Tehran. Israel ramps up strikes on southern Lebanon. The official death toll is more than 1,000 since early this month. And US stocks open higher on hopes of a de-escalation in the conflict. The benchmark price of crude oil also falls to below $100 a barrel. Iranian diplomatic sources have told Al Jazeera that Tehran has received a 15-point US peace proposal and have called it unreasonable. Iran is demanding guarantees that the war won't resume after a ceasefire, recognition of its sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, and compensation for damages. Al Jazeera has also learned that Pakistan is playing a role in indirect communication between the warring sides. Official Pakistani sources say that Islamabad is engaging Tehran over the US proposal. In Iran, US-Israeli attacks have continued. At least 12 people have been killed in Tehran. Iran has retaliated by striking central and northern Israel. Meanwhile, US media report that at least 1,000 troops will be deployed to the Middle East in the coming days. The Pentagon is also deploying 2 Marine units to the region with thousands of service members. Israel has continued to target Beirut. Strikes also hit several towns and cities in southern Lebanon. We are live this hour in Riyadh, Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, the White House in Washington, Baghdad and in Tehran. Ali Hashem is in the Iranian capital. So, Tehran says that the US demands are excessive and unreasonable. What more did it say?
Well, yes, Adrian, this is what Tehran said in its, at least for now, the official sources that's been demonstrating Tehran's reservations and rejection of the U.S. 15 points plan. The main issues Iran is talking about, first of all, that it thinks this is deceptive, this is misleading as a paper. Also, it has excessive demands, and that these demands actually are demands from a time that's before the war. Now, what the Iranians want, they are saying that, I'll try to read them directly from the paper. They want the enemy's aggression of acts of assassination to come to an end. They want the objective conditions established to ensure that the war will not reoccur. The payment of damages and this should be determined, and the end of war implemented across all fronts and for all resistance groups involved in this conflict throughout the region. Iran exercises of sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz is natural and legal right, and guarantees for implementation of the other parties' commitments must be recognized. These are the 5 points that Iran responded with to the 15 points paper. Now, does this mean Iran is refusing to sit? I don't see that in the paper. I see they're refusing the points, but the same concept of negotiations is still on the table.
Stay with us, Ali. Let's bring in our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett. Kimberly, what do we know about what's in this 15-point peace proposal, and when can we expect a response to Iran's response from the US?
Well, there had not been a scheduled White House press briefing. That all changed as news of this was coming down. Now we know there will be a briefing with Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, in about an hour's time, if it's on time. But having said that, we have reached out to the White House in the interim for response. None has been forthcoming just yet. But what I can tell you is that it's clear Iran has flatly refused to or rejected the White House narrative that diplomacy is underway. What the White House has put forward, though, is that 15-point plan. And what we know is in it is very familiar to what was being negotiated, and a deal was, we are told, was within reach before the United States launched its military strikes on Iran. It's limits to Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief, also limits to missiles, rollback again of the nuclear program, and IAEA monitoring. What's also, though, in there is that there would be access through the Strait of Hormuz. But again, this is the White House essentially putting forward this and also saying the talks are underway, even though Iran is saying just the opposite. In fact, the U.S. president saying that the talks have been productive, but the fact that Iran has put its own 5-point proposal as counter to this 15-point proposal doesn't suggest that these talks are at a high level at all, but instead suggest or give signals that these are lower level and discussions that are going back and forth through an intermediary.
Kimberly, stay with us. I'll be back with you in a moment. Let's bring in Al Jazeera's Rasul Sadar, who's in the Saudi capital, Riyadh. Rasul, what would GCC countries want from these negotiations, and would they want to be involved in them?
Well, at the moment, so they say they support this diplomatic efforts, but they're not.
Looks like we've lost the signal to Riyadh. Rasul, I can still hear you talking. We can't see you. We'll be back with you in a moment. First, Iran State TV has outlined 5 specific conditions under which Iran would agree to end the war. These include a complete halt to, quote, aggression and assassinations by the enemy, the establishment of concrete mechanisms to ensure the war is not reimposed on the Islamic Republic, guaranteed and clearly defined payment of war damages and reparations, the conclusion of the war across all fronts and for all resistance groups involved throughout the region, and international recognition and guarantees regarding Iran's sovereign right to exercise authority over the Strait of Hormuz. Ali Hashem in Tehran, what can we read into Tehran's response? Is there any prospect of Iran meeting with U.S. diplomats?
Well, it doesn't seem for now that the Iranians are refusing the concept of meeting. What they're refusing is the paper with the 15 points, and they are presenting their own points. Actually, what we are seeing currently is a kind of negotiations via media, via the public sphere. Now, what is going to happen next? This is the big question here, whether the United States is going to accept some of Iran's points, and then Iran getting to accept also some of American points, and this could create a kind of a framework for talks. In any way, sometimes parties tend to give their own maximalist demands in order to get whatever they want to do. Now, we are waiting for the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi to speak via State TV to have more of a clear understanding, because, you know, sometimes you have some lines quoted from sources, but whenever you listen to the official himself, he gives a certain context that could, in a way or another, change the meaning or give you another direction in analysis. So the main issue right now is that we're waiting for him. However, what we are in front right now is the wheel of talks is already going on air between both sides.
Al Jazeera's Ali Hashem reporting live from Tehran. Many thanks, Ali. Back to Kimberly then. As the U.S. says it's negotiating for a ceasefire, it's also building up its military in the region.
Yeah, it's words not matching the actions, which is an increasing military presence in the region. There are either thousands in place or thousands more set to deploy. What CENTCOM, Central Command, has told us is that there are upwards of 50,000 soldiers now in the region in some form or fashion. That includes 200 combat aircraft as well as 2 aircraft carriers. Now, in addition to that, what we know is the 82nd Airborne, composed of 1,000 additional troops, is the latest to supplement that. As well, 2 Marine Expeditionary Units consisting of 5,000 Marines and sailors are also heading to the region. So again, what we see is the U.S. speaking out of both sides of its mouth, for lack of a better comparison. We, on the one hand, have this 15-point proposal that has been put forward, and at the same time as there is a proposal to negotiate a ceasefire, there is an ever-increasing military footprint in the region.
Our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett reporting live from Washington. Kimberly, many thanks indeed. Well, Kimberly was just telling us about this, but let's look a little closer at the latest U.S. troop deployments. The amphibious assault ship, the USS Tripoli, is leaving Taiwan and is scheduled to arrive in the Middle East later this week. The U.S. vessel is carrying the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit with its complement of F-35 stealth jets and around 2,300 Marines. Another assault ship, the USS Boxer, left Southern California last week, along with accompanying warships. It's expected to arrive in the region by mid-April, with around 2,200 Marines from the 11th Expeditionary Unit. And 2,000 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division are expected to deploy to the Middle East in the coming days. Joining us once again in the studio, Ross Harrison, who is a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C., and author of Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. What are we to make of that troop build-up in the region? Is this U.S. plan less about reaching a peace deal here or more about increasing the pressure on Iran politically and economically?
That is the open question, Adrian, isn't it? Because I know the Iranians are actually taking that as a signal that the U.S. is intending not to de-escalate, but to escalate. But I think there's something else going on here. You know, there's all of these point plans, the 15-point plan put out by the United States, the three or 4 or 5-point plan put out by the Iranians. Listen, these negotiations don't take place typically in public, right? And so I think what's happening is there's a lot of signaling going on. And from the United States side, the signaling is a mixed message. As you mentioned, the troop movements are suggesting that they're actually buying time for aggression. It could be just a show of force in order to play a stronger hand at the negotiating table, but that's not the way the Iranians are seeing it. And I think the Iranians are very clear that they don't want to go back to the status quo ante. They're certainly not going to go back to the position they had when they were negotiating in Geneva, and that's their concern in terms of accepting the 15-point plan.
All right, so when Iran says that the U.S. demands are, excessive and unreasonable, what do we read into that? Is that just for public consumption, or do they really believe that?
Well, it could be both. I mean, it could be that I think they clearly have paid the biggest cost, the biggest price for this conflict, both the regime and the Iranian people and the state itself. So the fact that they would just go back and take the same demands that were being made in Geneva and then capitulate to those demands, even though there are some sweeteners in there. I mean, there are some sweeteners in that plan, but the fact that that would be the starting point or that would be the end point for them is just not reasonable. Plus, I think the question is, are they really finished making their point? Because the Iranians have a strategy. It's not to your earlier comment about the U.S. having a mixed message. The Iranians have a very clear message, and that is they're not going back to the status quo before the war. They're going to build deterrence, and they're going to escalate until they believe it's in their interest to de-escalate.
The proposal was delivered by Pakistan. What are we to make of that? Is this a serious diplomatic effort or yet more political signaling, as you say? How desperate are both sides to reach a deal right now?
Well, I don't think the Iranians have a certain amount of, we have a lot to lose, and they've lost a lot already. But I think their view, Adrian, is that if they capitulate or if they even agree to meet or to cease hostilities prematurely, then they're back to where they were, not in Geneva, but at the end of the June war of 2025. So I don't think the Pakistani